Hi, today we're going to be looking at precious metal clay. Specifically, we have the Art of Metal Clay book. So we're going to look at one of the projects in the book, and this is making one of the silver clay rings with a cubic zirconia in it. This book has these rings inside, and there are 3 steps to making a ring. And I think that this picture is really quite beautiful, and I wanted to recreate the rings, so thought I would give it a go. So the first step is to put some non-stick paper around your mandrel. So I used this baking parchment and I've just wrapped it around. And one of the things that I would recommend is that if you're able, is to draw a little line all the way around your baking paper. The reason being, when I've put this round before, my ring was really wonky, so I wasn't able to put my strip of silver clay around straight. And that is where it could be that if you've got one of these mandrels and you're able to put the baking paper around it, you can actually see those lines. It just means this one's a bit heavy. So with this one, I drew a little line and I just measured, really. And that's basically so that I'm able to line up my strip of silver clay and I know that it's gonna be straight. So the book recommends that you make your ring 2 sizes bigger than the size that you want your ring to be, because precious metal clay shrinks when it's fired. So this is our precious metal clay and we are getting out the pack. So I'm just gonna make this into a little ball. And I'm actually gonna roll this out, well, flatten this out a little bit, because what we're aiming to make is almost like a strip, because that's going to be the band of the ring and that's going to wrap around the mandrel. So I've put it on this Teflon sheet, and that comes in the precious metal clay kit. The book says that you can use playing cards to stack up and get a certain height, and that means that when you roll out your precious metal clay, you're going to have an even thickness. I'm going to use these 2 acrylic sheets because these come in the precious metal clay kit and they are a really good thickness. You also have to bear in mind that your precious metal clay is going to shrink. So I've got one of these rollers and I'm just going to use a little bit of the release balm on it because we don't want it to stick to the roller. So I've rolled this out, because I always think that you almost need a much longer strip than you think, so it's almost better to roll out more. And I've got one of these blades. Again, I'm just gonna put the balm on. Be really careful if you're doing this with your fingers, because obviously that blade is really sharp. But this is basically so your blade doesn't stick to your precious metal clay. I'm gonna cut here. So I'm just gonna cut. And I want this to be really quite sharp, so it's nice and neat and tidy. This is now our strip. I'm gonna pick it up. So I've really gently placed this around the mandrel and I've lined it up using my line. So I'm just pushing that one side down and I'm bringing this side over. So I've just overlapped it. It's probably only just long enough, but it's okay. Now we're gonna cut, and we're cutting at an angle. So I've cut it at an angle, and then I'm taking that top bit off, and I'm taking this underneath bit off, and then I'm pushing that together. So you can see where that joint is, but there is an angle that goes down. And we need to smooth this over. And then I have got one of these silicone tools, which are really useful. You can use a paintbrush as well. I prefer these because they give a real smooth edge and you don't get brush marks. And what we want to do now is we want to join this so it's one piece. So I'm going to just open it again. You need to add a little bit of slip. And this is where you want these to really join well. That join is not too bad. And we're gonna put the little silver setting on top of that join, but you don't want that join to be weak at all. So it does need to be really smooth. Top tip that I discovered is it's good to have somewhere to put this. So because you're gonna make a little ball and stick it on top, you need to put some of this somewhere safe where it's not gonna fall over. And I'm going to put it, I'm gonna wedge it in there. So this is a little ball of precious metal clay, and this is gonna make our setting. So I'm just rolling it a little bit. Try and get it really smooth because you don't want any little cracks in it. Because if you have little cracks in it, it's just something that you have to sort out later. Right. And then this little ball is going to go on top of here. And you do have to be quite careful doing this because you don't want to squash the shank that you've made. So I've just used some of the precious metal clay slip to put the precious metal clay ball on. So that's nice and even, it's in the middle and the join is okay. So I've picked a little cubic zirconia. This is going to sit in the middle of our precious metal clay. So I am going to push the cubic zirconia into the precious metal clay. You can see that some of my ball of precious metal clay has now cracked. So I need to mend those cracks essentially. And because the precious metal clay is still quite flexible, you can do this quite easily. It's really ideal to get the smoothest surface possible. But when this is dry, you can sand this. One of the important things to remember is that because the precious metal clay shrinks, that stone essentially can be pushed up. And I've pushed that stone in really quite far, but if it's not pushed in far enough, it will push it out, and it could push it out unevenly, and then you'll have almost a wonky stone. So I'm just gonna have a little check, have a little look at my band. So there's no real nicks in there, because if you've caught it with your fingernail or one of your tools, it is the opportunity just to make sure that you either kind of blend it out or fill it in. And you do need to be quite gentle with this because you don't want to at any point distort that band or make it wonky. So at this point, I feel like this is the most I can do to this now. What I need to do is put this somewhere where it can dry and then have a look at those joins. So once it's dry, you might see that where you've joined the top setting, that there's either a crack or there's a little gap. And I think at that point, if there is that, you then need to go in with your slip again, fill that gap in and let it dry. And the reason being is that you want that join to be really secure, because when you fire it, you don't want any stress cracks or you don't want that top bit to fall off. This precious metal clay ring has now been drying for 24 hours. We're gonna take it off the mandrel and have a look on the inside. This is just to check that everything has joined properly and that that join is really smooth. Now, it's nice to, at this point, give this ring a little clean up. In your precious metal clay kit, there are files that you can use, and there is also the abrasive pads. So if you've got any large areas that have either raised bumps or things that need essentially filing, it is good to use your files. So there's a little bit here of precious metal clay. The precious metal clay is quite brittle, so you need to be aware of that when you're working with it. You can kind of get a bit carried away and you don't realise that you're putting quite a lot of pressure on it, especially as this is a ring. So if you're squeezing this, it could crumble and break because you don't realise that you're putting pressure on it. I would take this tool here and just scrape. Because essentially, if you're going to wear this ring, you want it to be really smooth and soft. You don't want any sharp edges. So I've just picked away at that a little bit. So I've put this ring now on a flat surface. That is because I want to work on this outer edge of the ring without interrupting that stone setting. So that stone setting is sort of now hanging over the side. And I'm just really gently going to take some of this off. Again, you need to make sure that you're not putting too much pressure. I've used this that's in the precious metal clay kit, and it is an abrasive sponge, and I have gone all over the precious metal clay ring, just smoothing out all the areas. And it really depends on what kind of finish you want as to how smooth you go. So you could really work into this and make it really smooth. We're going to fire our precious metal clay ring now using a hand blowtorch. You need to torch fire it for 3 minutes. First, burn off that binder so you will see a little bit of a flame. When that's died down, you then need to get your piece up to temperature. When it's that glowing orange colour, you need to keep your piece at that temperature. At this point, it might be that you need to remove that blowtorch if things get too hot, because you really don't want to melt your precious metal clay ring. And once you have kept it for 3 minutes at that temperature, it would mean that your silver clay should have fused together. Once you've done it, just leave it to cool. Don't quench it in any water. Because you've got that stone in it, it could cause that stone to fracture and break. This is now cool. If at this stage you're looking at your band and you feel it might be a little bit distorted or wonky, you can put it onto the mandrel and then just gently tap that with a mallet just to bring it into a really nice even shape. So this is the wire brush, and we are simply just going to rub it over. It's never going to be the same as if you were to make a ring from wire or sheet, because you would get that really smooth finish. But it's nice to make sure that it's pretty round, and then you just remove all this top surface with this wire brush, and it gives a really nice brushed finish without having to really invest in a lot of polishing equipment or a tumble polisher. Because it's fine silver, it's just really sort of soft and has a really nice colour to it. Yeah, so if we look at the book, I don't think it's too far off. This is the ring that we made using precious metal clay with a cubic zirconia. If you've made a similar project, or if you've got any hints and tips, let us know in the comments.